Are you proud of yourself?
Oh, that's an interesting question.
This new business that you're now part of with RealTrust, it's kind of like you're a core team member. How's it been like for you?
It's been really exciting. And of course, I'm back to my love, my real estate, right?
Being a brokerage owner sounds like a pain.
It's a lot of work. Like people always ask me, why don't you start your own brokerage? It's not that easy.
What do you think the role of AI and technology in that sense is going to be in the Dubai real estate market going forward?
I mean, AI is the future, right? Now, is it going to take over the broker's job anytime soon? Very unlikely.
Companies like Redfin, they have this offering where one of it disintermediates the broker completely. Another part of it, which is kind of like, this is our premium offering, which includes a broker. I wonder if platforms out here like Property Finder might get into that. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of The Real Ones. Today, I'm joined by the one and only Majdel Musa. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's like deja vu. So Majdel is not only a mentor in the real estate world as, you know, the person that everyone learns all things real estate and law from at ThinkProp, but you're also now the director of operations and strategy, I believe.
Legal.
Director of operations and legal
Yes.
at RealTrust in the UAE. And you guys are all about conveyancing and escrowing. I don't know what any of those words mean, so I'm gonna rely on you to learn about all of that.
Of
But
course.
to start off, I always ask my guests, what did you want to be when you were 7 years old?
So I actually, funnily enough, I wanted to be a teacher.
Okay.
So I used to force my younger siblings, so I'm the eldest of 5. I used to force them to sit in these little school desks that we had at home. And I had my little chalkboard. And whatever lesson that day that I felt like teaching, I would force them to sit down and live through it. So yeah, I wanted to be a teacher. Then I got to my senior year in high school. And I took an intro to teaching course. And I went back to the junior high school where I attended. And so we're talking about 7th and 8th graders, so 12, 13-year-olds.
Okay.
Probably not the best age to test out teaching. So I changed my mind after that, like, maybe not.
Yeah.
So yeah, but now, obviously.
What kind of a teacher are you? Are you like strict and, you know, everyone's got to do the homework? Or like, you're like, I'll give you a pass. Like, what's the I'm serious.
Yeah. Well, luckily for the students at ThinkProp, they don't have to take do any homework with me. They're only here for a few days and then they get in, get out.
Sleep. Yeah. It's like law is probably one of those things that are, it's, you know, I feel like I've always been advised this by our lawyers and things like that. It's like the tiny things that you ignore are basically the things that'll blow up in your face.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. And I think that's where the legal world is, you know, so important to get a grasp of. So talk to me about your journey here. Like, how do you become this lawyer and then like get into real estate? And it's also like, you know, I feel like law and real estate, tech and real estate, these are fields that are still developing massively. So what was your journey like?
So it's actually the reverse journey. So actually I started in real estate and then went into law.
Awesome.
So basically when I was in university, so in the US, we don't have an LLB. We don't have a bachelor's of law.
Yep.
So we have to do a bachelor degree in something else. So I did political science.
Gotcha.
And I intended, okay, I'll go to law school, but I wanted a break after finishing uni. So I went to Jordan for a little over a year. And I worked actually as an editor in an English language magazine. So then my father went to Jordan and dragged me back to the US, kicking and screaming, said, back to reality, come do what you're supposed to be doing. So I was sitting in his office one day. So basically, he had an accounting insurance firm, and also he had a real estate brokerage license for his clients who had retail centers, strip malls, those types of things. He did property management for them. So I was sitting in his office one day. He said, do you want to do real estate? I said, oh, maybe, yeah, that would be interesting. He said, okay, why don't you go and learn residential, because I only know commercial, from somewhere else. Go get your license, go work for a while somewhere, and then you come back here and we'll do residential and commercial real estate. Okay, cool. So I took the course, passed the exam, got my license, and then I went to work in residential real estate for a year and a half. And then I decided, you know what? Actually, I'll go back to my original plan. Let me go back to law school. So went to law school. And then when I started my own firm, and the last year that I was in the US, so the year before I came here to Dubai, I decided I wanted to do real estate again, but as a commercial broker this time. So I did that, and then ended up coming here.
Wow.
Yes.
That's a very, so we have strip malls in the US and commercial, and then we end up in residential, and then we end up in Dubai.
Yeah.
And now you're like basically working on the infrastructure layer for everything, how you say, conveyancing, escrowing, etc. So like these are things that, before obviously me, Matt, and like I spoke to you guys, I didn't really know anything about. And I'm sure that most people that want to make their entry into real estate, they have no idea what these things are. All they know is that, you have to, there's obviously contracts, and there's, houses to sell, and there's deals to close. But beyond that, the granularity in that is really not something that we look into. So if I was an agent, right? And people say I look like one apparently now. So if I'm an agent and I need to post someone saying, hey, I like this property, I'm going to buy this house, what are the next steps that you take? And then where does escrowing and conveyancing come in?
Yeah. So basically in Dubai, there is a standard form that's required by the land department called Form F. So this is the contract between the buyer and the seller for the purchase of the real estate. So that needs to be signed. Now, ideally, the conveyancer would come in before Form F is even signed. Why? Because then we can put together the terms and conditions that go into the section where you can put extra terms and conditions in Form F.
Okay.
Now, does that always happen? No, because sometimes it may slow down the process, especially in a hotter market where sellers are saying, hey, let's go. I've got other buyers.
Yeah.
So they may not want to wait for the conveyancing team to
But
put
what are
together
they
the
doing?
terms and conditions.
What is a conveyance?
So basically, conveyancing is just the legal transfer of the property between from the seller to the buyer.
Okay.
So that's what conveyancing is.
Okay.
So I was the same way, by the way. When I came to Dubai, what is conveyancing? Because that's a very British, it's a UK term.
Yeah.
We don't use it in the US, even though I was doing real estate law in the US. We don't have a term for it, that whole process. So yes, it's called conveyancing. That's just the legal transfer of the property.
Got it.
So the first things then we do as conveyancers is that we would look at Form F, and if any additional terms and conditions need to be added, if we weren't involved in the process before it was signed, then we would prepare an addendum to the form to make sure all the proper terms and conditions are there. So that's basically where it starts. And then, of course, there's a lot of due diligence that needs to be done. So, for example, you need to verify the ownership of the property. You need to make sure that the right person is signing the contract, that they have proper ownership, etc. So verifying the ownership is a huge step in the process as well. And then also making sure there are no blocks on the property. So for example, if there are unpaid service charges, now that goes to the rental dispute center, and they can put a block on the property. So it can't be sold until the service charges are paid up. So we make sure that none of that exists as well. So then it keeps going. If you want me to keep going.
No. Oh, no. I'm not stopping.
I could talk all day about it.
This is basically just going to be like, when it comes out in a reel, it's going to be like 1, 2, 3, 4. That's what's going to happen. So I'm going to listen to the entire process. Yeah. Go for it.
So then the next thing is, of course, getting the NOC from the developer, the no objection certificate. Yeah. So that has to be done. Yeah. And if there are any mortgages on the property, then that has to be released. If the buyer is purchasing with a mortgage, they actually have to. So we act as the liaison between the banks, basically.
Okay.
And to make sure that the existing property, the existing mortgage on the property is released, and that the buyer gets their mortgage is completed as well.
So the pre-property transfer, this person's already pre-approved, etc., for this mortgage.
Perhaps. I mean, they're not always. Is that the best case scenario? Yes. You do, as a broker, want to work with people who have at least pre-approvals.
Yeah.
but it doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
So they may or may not have that.
Okay,
But
got it.
there's a final offer letter. So the real thing, pre-approval just means just from the paperwork we've seen, the basics,
You
yes,
should be
you
fine.
are qualified to get a mortgage, but
Yeah.
the final offer letter is the actual guarantee that they're going to get the mortgage.
Got it. So, and then the escrowing part is basically the amount that's being transferred between the bank and the
No,
folks
so
that's selling.
escrow, let me finish with conveyancing and then we'll get into escrow.
Yes. Oh, wow. So it's not over yet?
No, it's not over yet. There's more.
God. Okay,
but
go
wait,
on.
there's
Yeah.
more. Yes. So basically, okay, we got the mortgages, and it's the NOC, done all of the due diligence, and then also we're going to have to schedule the transfer. But before we do that, we make sure, at least at RealTrust, we make sure to collect all of the fees before we even schedule the transfer. So the transfer fees for the land department, the registration trustees fees, and even the broker's commissions, we're sure to take as well. Because oftentimes what happens is that the brokers show up to the transfer and sometimes the clients will say, oh, you know what, I didn't bring a check, I'll give it to you later, or I'll wire you the funds, and then they're chasing them and chasing them and chasing them.
Horrible.
And once in a while, you get a client that will just straight up in your face say, I'm not going to give you the commission, so good luck.
Wow.
Yeah. So we make sure on behalf of the brokers to also protect their commissions as well.
Is there like a glass door for customers that do that? Where it's like bad reputation clients like who don't pay
and then we're talking
commissions?
about defamation and all that. So,
wow. That's exciting. Okay, so we've got to that part. What have you missed something else in the conveyancing stack now?
So, of course, we attend the transfer and then disperse the checks as is appropriate. And then there's after service care as well, right? Making sure that the buyer received their keys, the access cards, et cetera. Copies of the title deeds are distributed to the proper people, et cetera. So there's a lot of work in the process.
Okay, and then the escrowing part is?
So escrow, so it's funny because brokers, when they hear the term escrow, they automatically think of the off-plan escrow accounts because that's all they really know when they hear escrow. But actually, the term escrow itself just means that a neutral third party is holding the funds.
Yeah.
So that is what we do. So for example, we will hold, so not the funds as in, we don't take cash because obviously at this point we're not a licensed or regulated financial institution. So we can't actually take funds and then disperse them or wire transfer, et cetera, at this point. But we take the check. So for example, when the buyer gives a deposit check for the 10% or whatever it might be, then, or even the seller, so the practice used to be sellers would give a security check for also the 10%. So we would take those checks and hold them until the transfer date and then give it back to the appropriate parties. So that's something else we do as well.
So you've told me what escrow is, right? But how does it work in the UAE and how do you guys come into that whole equation?
So it's really interesting because actually in the UAE, there is not one single company, whether even through ADGM or DIFC, that has a licensed activity called escrow. It doesn't exist in the UAE as of right now. So basically these companies that are acting as escrowees, they have fund manager or fund administrator licenses through DIFC or ADGM, but there is no escrow activity. So we are working with the authorities to come up with something like that. I don't want to get into too many details right now because it's very early stages. But so for now, what we're doing is we are using these ADGM and DIFC licensed companies. And basically, they are doing FX, so foreign exchange. And then they're able to produce the manager's check. Even one of them is able to take crypto and convert that into a manager's check as well. So this is how it's currently working.
Got it. So, I mean, that's very interesting.
Another benefit for the brokers who use us, besides the fact that we protect their commissions and make sure they get them at the transfer, is that we also will be the ones holding those checks. So if there is a dispute, usually what happens between the buyer and seller, they'll come, both parties will go to the brokers and say, I want that check. I want that check. I want the deposit check. I want the security check. Give it to me, give it to me, give it to me. And then they're, panicking and worried, what should I do? When in fact, they have to by law and in Form F, it states that they have to hold on to the checks until either both parties agree in writing
Yep.
to how to distribute them, or there's a court order. So the parties actually have to go to court, and there's a judgment, and then it directs them what to do with the checks.
Very
So that
interesting.
puts them in a really awkward position as well, especially if they're representing both the buyer and the seller, right? So that will also take that out of their hands.
Right.
And we will be the ones holding on to it and saying, sorry, either you have to agree or you have to go to court, and
Yeah.
we have to wait till there's a judgment.
So I'm not the legal expert for sure, but from like a normal deal standpoint, this looks like you're like the third party effectively between these two stakeholders, and you're effectively making sure that no one's acting in bad faith and things like
Yes.
that, and acting as that central point of trust, real trust. Oh, nice. I get it. I see.
You
I see
get
what
it
you
now?
did
You
there.
get
I got it. Real ones and trust, and like real trust. But so basically, interesting. What if you were to like say, was the reason that a brokerage, and I know a lot of them have their own conveyancing and sort of escrow services as well. Some of them just like to own the entire value chain, even though by design this doesn't make sense to have as part of your brokerage. What do you think is the reason that a brokerage should use a third party in this case, as opposed to owning that part of the infrastructure as well?
Like you said, it is overhead intensive, right? Because the cost of having these conveyancers sitting on the team and doing all the work, it is a regular cost with the salary and the rest of the overhead that comes with it. So that's one thing. And also, again, what we are doing specifically as RealTrust is making sure that the brokerage commissions do come to us before we will even schedule the transfer.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing, because they can't really enforce that, right? They're going to say, okay, let's go to the transfer, and maybe the check will come to them or maybe not that day. So that's something that we'll take care of for them. And then again, also taking them out of that position of, especially again, when they're representing both parties, where if there's a dispute between the parties and both of them want the security check or the deposit check, then that's out of their hands. And they can say, go talk to RealTrust, because they're the ones who have the checks,
So you're just like taking all the headache, basically.
Exactly. And then what we're doing is we're also letting them do what they do best, right? Which is sales and negotiations.
Yep.
Why are you worrying about paperwork? Why are you worrying about due diligence?
Yep.
When you should just be doing what you need to do?
So it's interesting that we talk about this whole like being this third party arbitrary kind of mediator almost in between these things. Crypto, smart contracts, these are like the fundamental principles are, let's say you hit X and Y criteria, smart contract releases funds, or is currently escrowing funds and will release funds to pre-negotiated parties, kind of a thing. And that's all something that you can do on blockchain today. How far do you think the legal world is, or the real estate world is, from actually being able to adopt from that? What do you think are the barriers for something like that?
Well, I think that, look, real estate is the perfect testing ground for blockchain.
Yeah.
But yes, it's going to take a lot to get to that point. And then also the use of crypto is also going to be an issue, because crypto then triggers AML issues as well.
Even in stable coins, we're talking about like your USDC and things like that,
yes,
even that?
And even, and especially under the UAE AML regulations,
right,
and which we could talk about in a little while if you'd like.
Of course.
So,
my favorite topic. Yes.
But
okay.
yes, but I think it would be a perfect testing ground, real estate for blockchain.
Yeah.
But I don't think we're super close to doing it, at least here.
Yeah.
Although we do have VARA, the Virtual Asset Regulatory Authority.
Yeah.
And there has been talk for many years from the Land Department that they'd like to be the first adopters of blockchain. So we'll see, but I think we're still a few years off of this.
Yeah. And what do you think about things like real world asset tokenization, right? Basically, this whole RWA concept that's coming out, and effectively tokenizing real estate. And obviously, I understand that the implementation of these things will take for a significant amount of time. But that said, to me, the idea of sort of having a more liquid secondary market is very interesting. And I think it makes it easier for the average person to invest. And we've seen companies like Stake, Baytukam, etc., like, come on and try to democratize access to investment in the space. But getting immediate liquidity without putting pressure on the company that's handling all of this, aka Stake, Baytukam in this case, would be something that's possible if you're tokenizing real estate, because you can find an immediate buyer, seller, like kind of double coincidence of once there, right? Like, so what do you think about that? And like, do you think there's actually any real merit to thinking that real estate could be
So I
tokenized?
think the difference, so this is where you can help me with this. So the difference between the crowdfunding, like the Stake, Baytukam, and the Smart Crowd, is that there's the token. It's a native token, right? It's native to the platform. It's not necessarily one of these other kind of cryptocurrencies that everybody's aware of and knows about. So that might be an issue. But also, again, I keep going back to this AML trigger, right?
Yeah.
So anytime we're talking about crypto, we're talking about AML. So there's got to be a way to balance it out, because it does bring up concerns about money laundering if you are using crypto. Yes.
So, I mean, provided that we have the right KYC and all this kind of stuff and complying with AML, like I think that's probably where you see some movement in this. It's not degenning and like, hoping that a dog coin reaches like, $1 million or whatever. So I think we need a little bit more stability there first. But in the context of AML, what is it that folks in real estate need to know?
So I mean, there's so much. Yeah. I actually teach a whole course on
that. Okay, plug. Let's
if you have 3 hours, we could do it now.
The link is in the bio.
So basically, for brokerages, they do need to have a compliance officer, and they also have to, of course, have AML policies in place. They have to register with the Financial Intelligence Unit on the Go AML portal. Okay. And this is actually really important because last year, so the Ministry of Economy, who was the supervisory authority for the real estate sector, had issued last year, they published the figures for Q1. Mm-hmm. And they stated that they had penalized 50 companies, and they actually stopped them from doing any business for 3 months just for failing to register on the Go AML portal. So that alone is super important. So make sure that you find a compliance officer, whether it's a trained compliance officer that has this experience or someone who's not, so it should be someone who is not client-facing. Not somebody who needs to go out and meet some quotas and targets and things like that. Right. For obvious reasons, right? Yeah. So somebody who is neutral. Now, a lot of people ask me, can it be an admin? I mean, does the admin actually have time to do this work? Probably not. But worst case scenario, yes, it could be theoretically an admin that's acting as the compliance officer. Yeah. And you can hire an AML consultancy that can help you with putting together policies, training, the compliance officer. That's something you guys are going to do as well? So not at this point. Okay. And not at this point, but because we also have, our own obligations as well. Yeah, of course. So, but so they can do that, have them trained to come up to speed on how to see the indicators, the red flags, et cetera, and how to report things to the FIU, the Financial Intelligence Unit. So they've got to do that, put together the policies, train the business on the AML policies, what the red flags or indicators are, et cetera. And they have reporting duties. So obviously, if there's a suspicious transaction, a suspicious activity, et cetera, they've got to report it. Got it. And they've got to maintain records for a period of 5 years. Okay. On both the clients and the transactions. So that's what brokerages have to do. Okay. Now, there is a circular that the Ministry of Economy issued in 2022 that is Circular 5. And that requires the brokers themselves to report. So they have to do a real estate activity report is what it's called. Okay. Now, again, it's through the compliance officer because there's going to be one person that's registered with the Go AML portal, basically. Right. So, but they've got to inform them that this REAR needs to be filed with the FIU. So when do they need to do that? 3 situations. So first one is if there is a deal where cash is involved for an amount of 55,000 or more dirhams. So 55,000 is very low. We've got rents that are higher than that, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, they've got to then file the REAR if it's 55,000 plus. Or if cryptocurrency is being used for either a part of the purchase or the whole amount. Or if crypto was converted into cash for, again, part of the purchase or the whole amount. So those 3 situations, the REAR has to be filed with the FIU. Now, the broker might say, well, what am I supposed to do? I'm not the compliance officer. What if they don't actually file it? So in that case, the broker needs to be very careful and keep a record of them telling the compliance officer. So however it is that they come up with the reporting mechanism in the business, whether it's through CRM, through an email, through WhatsApp, whatever it is, keep screenshots or print it out, do whatever you need to do to protect yourselves in case the authorities later come and say, why didn't you report this?
Right. So being a brokerage owner sounds like a pain in the bum.
It's a lot. It's a lot of work. Like people always ask me, why don't you start your own brokerage? It's not that easy. It's not like you just open the doors and start making money and that's it.
It's a ridiculous so many obligations. Amount of outflow, basically, right? Exactly. And there's like 5,200 plus brokerages. I don't know what the real-time stat is because I think there's, just as we have one project launching every 18 hours, we probably have one brokerage launching every week or every couple of days. So, I mean, in that context, right? If you were to say the top 3 things that a brokerage owner needs to keep in mind from the legal standpoint, what would those top 3 things be? So
I would say definitely the AML obligations.
Yes.
And then because you do have to keep records for 5 years, now we're also talking about data protection because UAE does have a data protection law. Now, the details aren't very clear yet. So it was issued and it came into effect in 2022. However, we're still waiting for the executive regulations that will detail more of the requirements plus the penalties, et cetera. So, but once that is issued, then companies only have 6 months to come into compliance with the law before the penalties start. So that's something important to know as well. So I would say, have the tech teams start trying to comply with what we know so far. And then that way they'll be able to quickly put everything into effect once the executive regulations are released.
So we've got AML, we've got data protection, and number 3?
Follow the RERA circulars. You know, there are so many. At this year, they really, I mean, when His Excellency Marwan bin Khaleta came into the role as the Director General of the Land Department, he really started cracking down on a lot of things, right? So we saw a lot of activity at the beginning of this year with for example, so they said, no more using the developer NOCs. Those developer NOCs were meant to market the whole project when it's off plan. And instead, what brokers were doing, they were using it to market the individual units on the secondary market. So finally they said, no more of that. Otherwise you get a 50,000 dirham fine. You have got to go get a Form A signed by the sellers like everybody else does.
Right.
And then you can market it on the portal. So that's one thing. Then the other thing was about taking down the listings. So people were leaving up listings. You know how it is with the portals. You will call and say, oh, it's not available anymore. So they were leaving them. And so they said, you know what, if you've sold it, if you've leased it, if it's otherwise no longer available, you've got to take it down within 3 days. Otherwise, we'll start penalizing 50,000 dirhams. And then, of course, the QR code. So that came into effect last year, where they require a QR code to be placed along with the permit number on all advertisements, whether it's on social media, the portals, etc.
Yes.
And they actually literally have somebody sitting there testing out like the QR codes to make sure, because sometimes they were putting fake QR codes or they were leading to another permitted property. So it wasn't for that specific property. So they are testing them. And then what they started doing with that was that they would look up who on the portal is putting up the advertisements. And if they noticed it's not a registered broker, they're also penalizing them 50,000 dirhams.
I feel like I'm getting the the real estate law tea right now. Like, like this is half. No, so that's awesome. Okay, so those are the main things to keep in mind as a
Yes.
brokerage owner. Now, technology is, taking over in a big way. We've had the software eating the world kind of thing for a long time now from Silicon Valley, but it's coming to Dubai in a big way, I would say right now, or rather being built from Dubai, with companies like Keeper raising almost $34 million just the other day. We've got Stake, Beitucom, etc. Like this, I've had pretty much all the prop tech folks on this podcast as well. And it's very exciting to see how they're trying to reinvent different parts of the process. A lot of focus on fractionalization right now, rent now, pay later, and then I think very few on the agent productivity side, but we've got apps like Really, etc., that give you access to these projects, almost like almost a hype drop kind of thing, but for real estate, which is an interesting analogy. But what do you think the prop tech landscape is missing from the legal standpoint? Because we've seen things like Robin AI and there's do not pay. Yes, they've got
about the speeding tickets
exactly,
and things like that.
Disputing the speeding tickets and stuff like that in court. What do you think the role of AI and technology in that sense is going to be in the Dubai real estate market going forward?
I mean, AI is the future, right?
Yeah.
Now, is it going to take, there's this huge fear amongst professionals that it's going to take over the jobs. Now, is it going to take over the broker's job anytime soon? Very unlikely. I'd say actually lawyers who are transactional lawyers who just review and draft contracts are more likely to be replaced by AI before the brokers are. Because buying real estate, especially for end users, it's a very personal, emotional experience, right? So you still need that human touch, basically. So I don't see that that's going to come and destroy the brokerage model anytime soon. But yeah, definitely with these other types of prop tech, I mean, it's there's huge potential there.
And in the legal standpoint, what do you think that looks like, right? So do you have a do not pay? Do you see a do not pay kind of a thing working in Dubai real estate?
Not really. I think they're going to be hesitant. So here's the thing with legal, like that's the last. Legal people are always the last to adopt anything.
Okay.
We're very resistant to change. If you think brokers are resistant to change, definitely lawyers are the most resistant to change. So I think there's going to be a lot of protectionism coming from, and I don't think that the legal authorities will allow that to happen anytime soon either. So yeah, I don't see that coming very soon.
Totally fair. So we won't worry about that then. So obviously, with this new sort of business that you're now part of with RealTrust and things like that, it's kind of like you're a core team member and, you're setting up this new thing. How's it been like for you?
It's actually so exciting. So I took a little bit of a career detour back in 2017 and I ended up in startups.
Okay.
I was at Souk and then 2 weeks later they were like, we have an announcement to make. Like, surprise, Amazon. So and then I went to Fetcher and then a couple of other things. So I've been at almost every stage except for IPO of a startup. And so for me, this is super exciting. I love startups because you put together everything from scratch. You're doing it yourself. You're building things out, right? The policies, the procedures, the processes, everything. And that's exciting for me more than being an established company where they're, here's the box, stay within it, and that's it, right?
No, absolutely.
So, no, for me, it's been really exciting. And of course, I'm back to my real estate, right? So, like, I'm back up to my roots.
That's going to be the start of my love, my real estate. Let's go. Okay, so you obviously meet with a lot of these entrepreneurs, and they have a ton of questions for you all the time. What are the most commonly asked questions? And what's something you'd like to share with those entrepreneurs, especially early stage and things like that?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's so much. So I actually used to be the legal mentor for 60-day startups.
Okay.
So yeah, they so many questions about how to review their contracts, how to keep track of their contracts, those
Yeah.
types of things. I mean, again, do we have another hour? Because I can go
That's
into
a
the
lot.
advice of that. So,
Yeah.
you know, there are all sorts of things regarding contracts. I would say, I know startups don't have the budget to get lawyers in the beginning, but at least with your own templates that you're using with your own clients or customers, spend the extra money to go to a lawyer the first time, get it right, because this is what you're using on a daily basis, right?
100%.
So do that properly.
Yeah.
And then as far as contract management, yes, you might not have the budget to get a proper system. So you can use your G Drive, right? Create folders and subfolders and keep everything there, especially if you're going to be fundraising at some point. Keep everything up to date because you're going to need it when they're coming to ask for the due diligence and they're going to say, hey, we need, you know, your
Data
contracts and all of your company documents, everything, you have it already there.
Yeah.
So make sure you're staying up to date with that. Another thing is, so I had actually a student from my Abu Dhabi licensing course last week who had asked me, she wanted to throw out a prop tech idea that she has. And so we were discussing the idea and I said, okay, but how are you going to get paid? And she said, oh, I'm going to take a percentage of whatever the sales price is. And I said, okay, so basically a commission, right? So how are you going to collect that commission? She said, well, I mean, it's in the terms and conditions. I'm going to have a really good contract for the users. I said, okay, but again, what happens when they don't want to pay you? You've got to then take this contract to court and you've got to spend money on the lawyers, on the court fee, all of that. And how many years is it going to take to get through the system? That's probably not the best way to do it. So actually coming up with a business model where you can collect the fees up front, or at least some of the fees up front if you can't do it, because otherwise you're going to be running around chasing the money, right? One of the startups I worked at, they actually, one day the finance team walks into the legal office and says, so yeah, we have accounts receivable for $2 million.
Wow.
$2 million. And when you look at it, you know, some of them are smaller accounts, or maybe 10,000, 20,000. Some are bigger, 100,000 plus. But when you had a clause in your contract that said it has to go to arbitration, and arbitration can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars at the end, it's not worth chasing. So what are you going to do? So try to come up with a model where you get payment up front, or at least some of it up front.
Gotcha. So people always trying to disintermediate folks, platforms or people or whatever it might be, in like brokers or portals or whatever it is. And we need to make sure that our business models are basically, you know, recurring revenue in some form and not solely reliant on, like, you know, a sale happening. Basically.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think we see companies like Redfin in the US try to go after this. Like they have this offering, which is very interesting, where one of it disintermediates the broker completely. And then there's another part of it, which is kind of like, this is our premium offering, which includes a broker kind of a thing, which is very interesting in my opinion. I wonder if platforms out here like Property Finder, things like that might get into that. But I don't know if it seems anti-competitive or how it plays off. But it's so interesting that they have part of their business as a sales-driven kind of, transaction-driven kind of a thing, and then the other is more recurring revenue. And I think it'll be interesting to see how, given all of the changes in the real estate landscape, including we've seen the MLS piece come out, spoken about it a few times, and how that'll impact everything and how these portals basically sort of adapt to these different types of innovations. I think it'll be very, very interesting to see. So in the context of legal real estate, have we missed something? Is there something that's like, you know, burning in your soul to say, we didn't talk about this thing and everyone's just gonna get fined like $1 gajillion because of it, you know?
I mean, license your brokers, basically.
Yeah.
You know, some of these
Basics.
So it really is the basics, right? This is the first thing that you learn in the RERA course, which unfortunately at this moment is no longer required. Maybe it will make a comeback. But so license them, because they are cracking down on unlicensed brokers. Now I understand yes, it's not legal from an immigration perspective to have brokers working for a month or two to see whether or not you want to keep them on before you take on these visa costs, etc. But some of them just keep them indefinitely unlicensed, right?
Yeah.
So definitely not a good practice, because we don't even know what the figures are, by the way. So we know there are about 17,000 licensed brokers.
Yep.
We're guessing that there are maybe 35, 40,000 unlicensed brokers.
On top of that.
So yeah.
Oh wow. So that's insane. Oh wow. That's a 60,000 Asian market.
So we need to clean that up for sure.
Yeah. And what is being done right now to clean it up?
So again, like I said, they are checking. So when they go and check the QR codes, for example, they will go and see on the portal, who was this? What's the name of this broker listing? And then they'll look them up in the registration system. And if they're not registered, then the brokerage gets penalized. Yeah.
Awesome. So, okay, I think we've covered most of the legal turf then. Are you proud of yourself?
Oh, that's an interesting question.
Yeah, it's a curveball in there.
Yeah, no, it is. It's a really good question. Yes, I would say I am. Yes. I feel like I've done a lot of different interesting things in life, and some things I never imagined. I mean, I didn't even imagine. I used to say, I would never come to the Gulf. It's too humid. And here I am for 10 plus years. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's, I would say yes, I am proud of myself.
It's amazing. And if you were to say one piece of advice to your 21-year-old self, what would that be?
So went through a lot of changes in life and a lot of things I didn't expect, whether it's personal or professional. Yeah. And I would say take the opportunities as they come, take risks, and just buckle up and enjoy the ride.
Yeah. I think that's great advice. Sometimes it's just like, I see a lot of folks that come on here and they kind of say, I don't want to interrupt my past self at all. Just like keep doing your thing and like, keep hustling. And like sometimes it's just about staying the course and staying disciplined for quite some time at it. So like you said, buckle up and, get ready. I think you just get tougher as the journey goes on and like get better at handling shitstorms. Yes. Pardon my French, but it's just what happens, right? I think there's certain points in our life where we think like this is the biggest crisis that can ever happen to me, and then the next thing like 6 to 12 months later, it's something else. It's just that you're better prepared to kind of deal with.
Exactly.
Wow, this has been fun. Thank you so much, Majdel. Like I think it's just been a really, really insightful. I'm horrible at the legal side of this, so my lack of understanding of that will show like crystal clear. But at the same time, I think it's so important for us to have our basics down, and you are the authority, the legal expert. I don't know if you're going after the legal queen title now that you're with the data queen. So we'll see. But thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
Really appreciate
Thanks
you coming
for having me.